to kick things off with announcements. If you have an announcement you'd like to make, please line up next to Elliott over here. If you have a job you are hiring for, if you have a game you have recently released that you would like to shout out, if you have an event you are running, or that you just want to let people know about, come on up. For our part, oh wait, actually, where's Alberto? You have an event coming up, I hear, right? Yeah. You want to announce it, or maybe Gavin should announce it.
Sure, either way.
Either one, I don't know. Let's talk about. I don't know the details, and I didn't look them up. So, Boston News runs coffee hours every Friday. You can find them on ours. Sorry, am I stealing your thunder, Chad? You can do coffee. No, go for it. Coffee hour every Friday, 8:30 a.m. Come hang out. It's on Zoom. Very easy. Just chill for like an hour and chit chat about what you're working on or what you're playing or whatever. It's organized on the Slack channel, slack.bostongamedev.org. We just posted the link in the events channel. Pretty casual. That's all I got. Here you go.
Hello, I'm Caleb, and I'm currently developing a game called Brick Strike, and I'm looking for a contractor to work on a trailer for the Steam page. And this would be for the initial launch of the Steam page. So if you are interested or know anyone who would be interested, come talk to me later.
All right, so May 5th through 11th, we're running a thing called Boston Game Dev Week. You can find more info on the current schedule at gamedev.boston. A big part of that, what I'm organizing, is GodotCon. Tickets went on sale last week, so if you want to get tickets to GodotCon, we have workshops on Monday, and then Tuesday and Wednesday are regular talks and all that good stuff. We have, I think, 100 tickets left, and it is right here in the Nerd. We take this whole floor over and go wild, and yeah. So, and also calls for speakers and presentations are for, I think, 4 or 5 more days. So if you want to talk, sign up.
What were the dates again, sorry?
It's May 5th through 7th is the GodotCon.
It's right before PAX.
Yeah, it's right before PAX East.
And Boston News is also going to do some stuff that week, which I'll announce later. It should be a good time.
Hey, I'm Gavin. On March 17th, we're going to have Alberto coming to give a talk on modern day development on a Game Boy. 4 Shades of Green, right? That was the talk. Just want to make sure you're getting the title right. Okay. It's going to be over at the Aeronaut on the 17th, so St. Paddy's Day. Come out, see a really cool talk, come get some drinks. It sounds like a great way to spend your St. Paddy's Day, so. There was a meetup page 5 seconds ago. I think I accidentally deleted it. It will be back up later tonight.
Hey, I'm Zamin. I'm a student at Clark University. We are hosting a game jam this Sunday. We're looking for judges, so if anybody's interested or they're free from 4 to 9 on Sunday, preferably if you have industry experience, please approach me or the guy with the Clark University hat over there, and we'll give you more information. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jay, and I am going to be hosting a Boston Game Dev booth at PAX East. If you are an indie game developer or an indie game studio, we'll be opening up submissions soon towards the end of February.
Hi everyone, my name is Greg. I am a manager over at Demiurge Studios. We're a local studio that's been around for a very long time at this point as far as the game industry is concerned. And we mostly do code development work. But we have a cool new internal project that we are just starting to ramp up. And so we're hiring a senior combat designer for a PvP shooter type game, as well as an executive producer. So if you want to get in on the ground floor of a brand new game IP, we're making something really cool, please talk to me. Again, I'm an engineer. I can't tell you exactly what those roles are beyond what's on the rec, but I'm happy to refer you to the right people. So yeah, come work with us at Demiurge.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. As a reminder, Boston News is committed to creating a safe and respectful space for game developers in the local area. By attending this meetup, you agree to our code of conduct, which was pasted on the meetup page. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier. What else we got? Follow Boston Indies on all the socials, at Boston Indies, Instagram. I think Blue Sky is the main one I'm using these days. Twitter sometimes. Just a Facebook, technically. I don't know. I mentioned the Slack channel earlier, but that is like the main hub for communicating with folks in the local community. So that's at slack.bostongamedev.org. Come hang out. And I think that's it. Following the talks tonight, we'll head over to Flat Top Johnny's, which is a bar that's like, I don't know, three blocks away. It's next to the train station, so if you're going that way, you might as well come hang out. Well, I don't know, they got pinball, got pool, a couple beers. Hot dogs are pretty good, very reasonably priced. And I think that's going to do it for announcements here. First up for lightning talks tonight, we have Elliott Mitchell. Give it up.
Hey everybody, I'm Elliott Mitchell. I'm here to talk about volumetric video content for Unity and Unreal. I'm the co-founder of Vermont Digital Arts, and I'm the OG co-founder of, I'm not plugged in, of the original Boston Unity group, which is no longer a thing. Let's see. Let's go back. All right, here we go. So you can find me, Mr. T 3D, on all the socials and all that. So just quickly about me, I've been doing this for about 30 years in the digital arts, 18 years in the game industry. Originally an artist, but I do like code and biz dev and all that stuff. And then the last of my own games I've worked on was Waggle Words. It made it to #3 of paid word games. It's an AR game released with the AR kit. Otherwise, I've been working on other people's things for a long time. So when we talk about like volumetric filmmaking or volumetric assets in video, we're gonna step back for a second to like, what is volumetric? So it's like making photorealistic scans. So if you've used megascans in Quixel and Unreal or Unity, they basically take an array of cameras or a single camera and they turn something and they take photos. Then a computer puts together like a 3D reconstruction of it. So I started doing this sort of thing back 2015. I worked on Bjork's VR exhibit. So we did photogrammetry in Iceland and put together this like VR stuff made of like reconstructed terrain taken by drone pictures and put it all together. I did some work here at Harvard where we had laser scanning. LiDAR is another way to get, so it's like little points from a laser and it gets a point in space and a color associated with that point. And we took the LiDAR and we reconstructed a polygonal sphinx, and it went into like an AR app at the New Ocean Museum. And then it wound up, being an AR thing. Here's the sphinx reconstructed, and I used Substance Designer to like retexture it and all that. And then we also took photogrammetry. We took a bunch of pictures of the stela in front of the sphinx and did stuff to translate it. As far as like volumetric filmmaking itself, this is The Last Supper. It was we did this for New York Fashion Week with Tom York with an original soundtrack and Rag and Bone. And so we put this together, and we did this by having Kinect cameras, like from the old Xbox. And we used something called Breckle, where we basically collected a bunch of depth data and color data from a bunch of actors and models and stuff for a fashion week. Then we brought it into Houdini and removed all the polygons and just had the points. OBJ sequences without the faces. And then we made this thing here. There's a video of it. I'm not going to show because I'm running out of time quickly. But anyway, this was AI before it was cool. It was an AI hosted dinner fashion show, so back in like 2018 or something. This other film I worked on, The Changing Same, we used something called Depth Kit. This was nominated for an Emmy and won some stuff at Tribeca and Sundance. And we basically had a series of Kinect cameras with actors, and we recorded them and put this together as a VR experience. And it ran 90 frames a second in VR, all that. Again, that was using Depth Kit, which I'll go over these other options pretty fast. Another one, which I came in later to optimize for the Quest, was Clearskins. This did photogrammetry of the inside of a car. And then we had volumetric capture of these two people, the parents of someone who had passed away from AIDS. And you're going through the person's belongings in the back of the car, interacting with it while they go through their like crazy story. Super intense. I also won, I think, a Peabody and a bunch of awards. And again, this is another one I worked on. And these tend to be more filmic. This is Queerskin's arc. It was like the next in the series, and this was volumetrically captured at the Intel studio, which I'll give slides of later, but it was like hundreds of cameras and like stadium size. This also ran at 90 frames a second, and the background is all photogrammetry, and then the actors are volumetric video. And we rendered them through a VFX graph, so they're running as particles. This is videogrammetry, which is sort of like photogrammetry, but using video cameras. And then you analyze the data and make point clouds out of them, so there's little points. You go through, and we wound up doing this in this town, Truth or Consequences, which is a real town in New Mexico, where there's the spaceport. And so this was like someone's collection of stuff, but there's a whole video, and this went into like actually a film that was like a flat film. And so it was like reconstructing 3D world out of video cameras. So I'm just going to talk about some of the tech to do this. So the first one on my list here is Depth Kit. And you can see there's like, over here, there's like depth map, and then there's color maps and stuff. So you can use a Kinect camera or a RealSense camera, Intel RealSense camera, and you can basically with a single camera just have like a reconstruction of 3D in real time. And I think originally Kajiro Takahashi from Unity made a plugin for Unity. It can go right into VFX Graph or whatever. Depth Kit's really cool because you could do single camera or multi-camera capture. And it can run in a video game or like a webcam and stuff like that. This is a Depth Kit look thing. It doesn't really read well there, but that's like a super abstract video of my daughter. And so you can make it, it doesn't have to be photoreal, so you can just make your own looks and particles and all these things. So that, you might have to see that one running to actually know what that is. Evercoast is another option, and Evercoast is the people who acquired Depth Kit, and they're based out of Brooklyn, and they're in the Navy Yard right now. But it's, yeah, a bunch of like depth camera sensors, a small like 3-meter space, and basically it can output, same with Depth Kit, and all these can output OBJ sequences where they have their own proprietary videos that then reconstruct meshes on the fly. And Evercoast is a little bit heavy, like you can have 1 or 2 actors on a scene on like a quest, maybe 1, maybe 2. And that's about it. And Depth Kit can take light, you have lit shaders, unlit shaders. Evercoast is just unlit right now. It's just not really all that optimized, but it's a really cool solution. Then there's Metastage, which is like one of the bigger ones. They use the Microsoft Reality Capture, which has now kind of gone under and then been licensed out through different ways. But they're like in LA. They've done a whole bunch of work. And they'll basically output OBJ or their own proprietary Microsoft VolCap format, HCAP it's called. And you can, like if you use their services or whatever, they can output like meshes, these output meshes and image sequences. And they can either be image sequences or video or all together or whatever. But they can be optimized for like mobile devices and whatever, all that kind of thing. So you can have like an augmented reality thing show up on your table, whatever. So far, Metastage and Depth Kit both also support Vision OS, which is kind of cool, although they're not all that optimized. This is the Intel capture thing I was talking about we used for Queerskins. So it's massive. They went out of business on that. Several projects I've worked on, like as our project was finishing, they've gone out of business. So it's a very volatile industry. But like they did these captures, they can capture 20 actors at once in here. They have like horses running around and shit. It's amazing, but like the amount of data that collects, and this is using actual like not depth cameras, these are all just cameras. So it's almost like photogrammetry or videogrammetry on like hundreds of cameras. So the storage capacity of that is like massive and crazy. And then to edit, I think they used Houdini to like edit the point cloud data. It was a really painful process. Canon has a space that's sort of similar where I think they have like 100-something 4K cameras in Brooklyn now at Zero Space. And we were about to use these for a project. I'm working on something with Elliott Page for when Brooklyn was queer. And it's like a pilot for like an XR series. It's been on Vanity Fair, so I can talk about it and stuff. But we were looking at Canon, and they're not ready. And then finally, Arcturus, my favorite. There I said it. Arcturus is some people who I worked with on the Bjork project for a while, and they're based in San Francisco. They acquired a studio, Twisted Oak, my friend Devin Horseman out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And so they have the license to all the Microsoft Capture stuff. Then they have their own proprietary like SDK called HoloSuite and a tool called HoloSuite where you can do like basically After Effects for volumetric video. And so, and it can even like retarget captured video and put a mesh in it, and it's crazy. And Devin's like a genius, and I only have a few seconds left, but this is like 7 NPCs running 60 frames a second or 72 frames a second on a Quest. So this is the one if you want to go VR, and they also works on Vision OS and all that. And then I'll just mention these two because I'm just going over slightly. One is LifeCast AI, and this is NERFs, which is like neural radiance fields, something like that. And it's kind of like takes pictures, but it invents things. It's using AI, and it's kind of fuzzy. It's not very performant for game engines or anything like that. And then the last is Gaussian splats, which people might heard of. And now they have like, these are like taking point data or photo data and then creating 2D planes that all like align based on camera. Not very performant, except for this Garcia AI now is running on the Quest, and they have it in video like 4D. So this is like probably the thing that's going to replace those other capture studios with all those things. It's probably like 4D Gaussian splats. And I guess I've seen that they can run at like 500 frames a second. So that's kind of insane. Yeah, that's it. 11 minutes. Oh yeah, if anyone has any questions.
Do you do your own stuff that you capture personally, or not? Or you just do
I haven't used them, like the Garcia AI, like I've used some that other people have done, like Kajiro. No, RS from Unity formerly has like something that works in HDRP, and I made it work in URP. I haven't captured my own yet, but Garcia, I played around with it, and like it's not an SDK, it's like their own platform. So that's like the downside of those right now. But I've been like talking to them and trying to encourage them to make an SDK plugins for other platforms. But another friend of mine, one of the co-founders of Scatter, now works at Adobe, and he has some kind of pipeline for making your own Gaussian splats. He was using like a drone to capture stuff and then make Gaussian splats out of them in 4D.
Next up, we got Chad.
All right, I'm just gonna give a very quick talk about parenting. So parenting is hard, and as many times as people are gonna tell you that, you're not going to internalize it, and you're gonna be like, yeah, it's hard, I get it. But like parenting is like really hard, and I cannot stress enough, like no matter how many times I say it in a row, it's gonna be a little bit harder than you think, right? So the first part of parenting is actually deciding to have a baby, right? And this part can be really fun, right? Lots of people have a lot of fun with it. Some people schedule it out. You know, it's 7 p.m. upside down in the foyer. But however you want to parent or however you want to make a baby, you can try that. And hopefully you'll get lucky and you'll be pregnant. Well, some of you, not all of you, it's not going to be pregnant. You might feel excited, you might feel nervous, you might have some sort of false confidence, you might think you're going to do it just right, better than your parents. All these feelings are super valid, right? Because every baby is different, every parent's different, it's all going to be pretty wild. So right before you're going to have this baby, you might be starting to freak out. You might be like, oh my God, I can't believe this is going to happen. You might have prepared. You might be the type of person who's read every book. 5 months out, you might have built the nursery, looks great. Or you might be the person who's kind of winging it. Not quite there yet. But either way, it's gonna come, right? Like time does pass, whether you want it to or not. So when you have a baby, every single moment is spent like thinking about this baby. And you're like, oh my God, is it breathing? Oh my God, what's this cry mean? What's that cry mean? How's the milk doing? Like, is she drinking enough? Why isn't she drinking enough? She drank 2 ounces yesterday and 3 ounces today. Something is wrong, something's going on. So every single moment, whether you're in the shower, whether you're driving the car, whether you're away, whether you're with the baby, you're gonna think, baby, baby, baby. Everyone is gonna give you advice as well. They're gonna be like, this is what worked for my baby. This is how my baby was a success. And you cannot take all of it. They'll give you conflicting advice. One person says, never go to bed after 7. One person says, stay up as late as possible. One person says, cry it out. One person says, that's cruel, don't do it. No matter what, you have to figure out what works for your baby because every baby is unique. It's hard to get through the toddler phase, but the thing that makes it all worth it is there's all these different milestones that happen really quickly there, right? So you're gonna get first words, whether it's daddy or hello or mama. You're gonna get first steps, and those are exciting, but now, you gotta baby-proof the house, because now they can hit their head on everything. Unfortunately, then they're gonna start talking, and you're gonna start getting lies as well. So you get the good with the bad, and you gotta figure out how to navigate this. And then finally, they grow up enough that it's time for school, right? You spent a long time raising this child, you set it up for success, and now it's time to introduce some structure, right? It's gonna be not necessarily entirely in your hands at this point, and this is great. You go to elementary school, and you're gonna be amazed at how your kid comes back learning new things. All of a sudden, they can do math. They come back and they say, oh, I'll read the book tonight. And you're like, oh, you can read, that's crazy. Unfortunately, you also have them learning from other kids, right? They may come home and say, hey, did you know Santa isn't real? Why have you been lying to me? You can also push off these kind of scary conversations for later. It's maybe not the best decision, but at this point, you might think, well, they can't quite handle the truth, and so you put it off. But middle school comes around, and your child will start pushing new boundaries. So they may ask you if they can stay up later. They may tell you that there's something on at school. They may say they need a certain thing for lunch. They don't like the way you do something. And of course, there's also gonna be some more lies. And at this point, you probably have to start curtailing those kind of things. We march on and we get into high school. And at this point, your kids have kind of developed their personality. You might be thinking, oh, well, 14 years down, 4 to go. This is great. But this is kind of like the second half of getting to 18, right? So parenting is hard, and at this point, you think, okay, we're coasting, but you're not. Like, this is gonna be even harder, especially depending on your kid and how you've curtailed those lies and made a good amends with your kid. This could be even harder if you've kind of let those things go. And then eventually it's time to say goodbye. Your kid is their own person, they're 18, they've grown up. You don't really want to try to change them. And it's like a sad time, but also you feel like maybe I'm gonna get my life back now. Like now I'm gonna go do all those things I put off for 18 years, and you're so excited. Except these days, kids come home, right? So you think that you're done, but you're not quite done yet. No one just releases a kid and then lets it out into the wild and waits. Oh, sorry, what was sometimes there's college, right? It's optional, technically. Some kids don't need to go to college. Maybe they wanna go to a trade school. Maybe they already have something else they wanna do. Maybe they wanna be a writer and they've already found some success. Maybe there's some reason that they don't wanna go to college, even though it seems to get increasingly more important these days. But if you do, you're kind of just putting in a lot of money and hoping that they actually learn something useful. Don't spend the time slacking off. So, sorry. I forgot this was Boston Indies. Sorry, 1 second. That was the wrong talk. That was the wrong talk. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna give a talk about making games. So making games is hard, and as many times as I tell you that, you're not going to internalize it. Making games, if you want to see them all the way through, if you want to see them to completion and release them, they're hard, right? And no, really, it's hard to submit to finishing a game, get it on Steam, get it on itch somewhere, put it out to people, let people see your work and judge your work. That's really hard. Getting there is just as hard. So the first step is deciding that you're gonna make a game, right? You're trying out new ideas, you're having a lot of fun with it. Some people have a lot of fun. Some people do research. You know, they figure out what genres they need and they plan it a little bit more carefully. But after you're done prototyping, you kind of have your idea. You're like, oh man, I think I got something here. You could be excited, but you also might be a little bit nervous. Like, how am I gonna make this work? Like, games don't make money anymore. This is crazy. What am I doing? These are all valid feelings, right? But eventually, you're working on your game. You've gotten it far long enough, and you're like, all right, I think I am going to do this. Like, I need to release this. Like, I need to stop slacking, and I need to pick this idea, and I need to finish it. And so, boom. Now you know what your game is, and you're gonna think about it like every minute of the day. Like seriously, like you're gonna have ideas all the time. You're in the shower, oh wait, I could have fixed it like that, and then you'll go and fix that later. Or like you're watching a movie and you're like, oh, that's a brilliant idea. I totally wanna like steal that little bit from my narrative for my game. Or like you're playing another game and you're like, oh, they just cheated. They just did this. It's not even a problem. I just made up a problem. Again, everyone's gonna have advice from their successful game, but feel free to ignore some of it, right? Like some people just get lucky. Some people have a certain style of game. Not all advice is gonna work for you. You're gonna have your own unique things that you need to do for your game. So milestones. If you didn't get any kind of excitement out of making the game, you probably wouldn't finish it. And so there's plenty of exciting things that happen along the way that keep you going through the early stages of the game. So you get new effects on the screen, right? You get a new character on the screen. Or maybe you just make an underlying system of the game. Like you finish the combat, or the trains now move all around in a circle, and you're like, yay, this is great. But also you find bugs. You may ignore those for now a little bit because it's kind of volatile, but this is where they start showing up, and you have to decide whether you're gonna fix them or not. Eventually, you might decide that you need a little bit of structure. So your game is taking shape, but now you're gonna do like project management. Now you're gonna have a Trello board, you're gonna have a Jira, you're gonna actually schedule it out, and you think this is gonna be like saving so much time, but like now all of a sudden you're like, wait, I need to actually think about all the problems. Now I actually, oh wait, I didn't realize I had to do that. And so now you're like, uh-oh, this is serious. So your first thing is you're in production, right? So it's awesome when you're in production because things come online at the beginning and you're like, oh yeah, this game is gonna be the best. I'm making a game. But then other people are gonna judge your game and they're gonna tell you the things that you need in your game because they don't have your vision. So they're like, no, like you need to have reload work like this. No, you need to have jump work like this. And you can choose to ignore that or not. It's easy to kind of ignore some of those big things, like certain things, you're like, I don't know how I'm gonna do it, and you push it back a little bit, but maybe you should make those decisions now. Next is alpha. So now the code base is getting kind of rigid. You can't really just rewrite entire things at this point. And so now you're also gonna have more bugs, and they're gonna be harder to fix at this point, because now you can't just change the whole thing just to avoid it. You have to figure out how to make this work without breaking the other thing. So there's a, yeah. And then you're gonna enter beta. And then at this point, you're kind of like, oh, I know what my game is. This is so easy. Time to turn on maintenance mode, right? Like you did 90% of the game. Unfortunately, now you gotta do the remaining 90% of the game, which is to fix all these bugs and stop, figure out when to stop. So yeah, so you're gonna release a game, right? But more and more these days, everyone needs to do DLC and everything needs to be a live service game. And every single time you're like, I could do one more expansion. I could add one more piece of content and maybe people will actually start playing the game. Maybe people will start viewing it even better. Maybe my long tail is still growing. But you know what? Some games don't need DLC. You're just trying to put in more money and see if you can get something good out. And that's it. Thank you.
Matt, you're up next. Anybody have any questions about?
So the birds and the bees.
Was I a baby?
Never. Not you, Chris.
Where did babies come from?
Ask me later.
Questions are canceled. No more questions. Thank you.
That was awesome.
Okay, so hi, I'm Matt. I'm a Unity developer here. Well, I guess hobbyist, making games in Unity these days. I know there's a lot of other engines here. I'm going to try and keep this more high level. But I'm going to be honest, the only reason that I'm talking today about dots is because I decided not to leave Unity and go for Unreal about a year ago, and that's because I wanted to try out this cool new tech stack. And I also want to talk about this to see if there's anyone else working on this tech stack that wants to collaborate, because there's not a lot of documentation out there. So dots is also known as the data-oriented tech stack, and that had a cool thing, all right? And so dots is comprised of 3 different things that Unity's developed to help you make more efficient games. We have the job system, which finally brings multi-threading to Unity. Then we have the burst compiler, which is going to give your slow C# code a little boost and actually optimize it to a native machine code to make it run a lot faster than normal. And then finally we have ECS, which is about data management. It's going to be able to take all the data for your game, store it in a very efficient way so that you can access it very quickly at runtime. But I know, like, why do we care about this? We've all heard about dots probably 1,000 times, but no one's really using it. So one more time to try to convince you. So say you want to make a new video game, and we'll call this a really cool original game, Night Army. And obviously, we're going to make a lot of money when we make this game. So we want to make it as efficient as possible. And what does Night Army need? We need to have lots of cool knights. And if we're going to code this in Unity as the way that I would do it normally before I did dots, I'd make a lot of C# classes. These classes would probably be, I don't know, maybe a soldier class that'll help you manage combat. Maybe that'll reference an instance of an attack class, as well as a movement class to help you move around the map, and health, obviously, see if you're going to die. And so if we have this setup here, we have what the user sees in the game. They're ready to play. They're excited for Night Army. They followed all the steps Chad was just talking about, and it's finally time to play. And then we have our RAM warehouse where all the data is going to be stored for our game. So let's get started. We have our knight hopping in. That's the only animation I know. And then as we all remember from one slide ago, there's 4 classes that we need to instantiate for this knight. We have the movement, health, attack, and soldier classes. And all of these instances of these classes need to store data in the RAM warehouse so it can be accessed during the game. And our computer's like, whatever, it's one knight, who cares? It shouldn't be too big of a deal. But this is called Night Army. And so we have a lot more knights that we want to put onto the field. And each of these knights are going to need to store instances of all these classes. And they're going to be stored in really gross ways that are going to be a lot harder to navigate for our computer, which is why a lot of these, this methodology doesn't scale well in Unity right now. And a sneak preview is that if you had used ECS, the entity component system, to organize your data would look something like this. It'd be a lot more clustered together. Data of the same type would be stored in a way that the computer can run through it very quickly. And this is one of the main reasons why when you see videos about dots and ECS online, they are a lot faster than the alternative. And the main tenet here is that classes are the devil. Dots doesn't like classes. We don't want to use them. They're going to slow you down, at least for people like me. I'm sure there's some geniuses here who are able to utilize them in a much more efficient way. And again, Unity ECS essentially is going to take all your data and store it in an in-memory database so it can be easier to access at runtime, and we can treat it pretty much like we would a regular SQL database that we all know about already. We can think about the entities as primary keys and the components as database tables. So the same primary key can be used to access any of the tables, which is why it's a lot faster to look up data for an entity than otherwise. Then when ECS has 3 components, entity component systems. The systems are what's actually going to execute the code. They're the ones that are going to do all the legwork to query these databases to get the data they need to execute. And if we talk about the evil mono behavior update method, which no one likes anyway, they have the onUpdate method in the system class, or the system structs, I should say, no classes. And we're going to execute queries that iterate over the results. So instead of basically having a state machine class for every single one of your soldiers, you're going to have one for each loop that iterates over all your soldiers at once, which makes things a lot faster, at least with the way ECS is set up. And so it's pretty easy to visualize these classes. We'll treat them as components, and then each knight will have a primary key that they could use to get the data they need from each of these components. And then we have our systems, we have our tables, and then when we're executing our queries for this, we can easily say, all right, give me all the soldier and component, soldier and attack components. We're going to make an update, or your queries can say, give me all the soldier attack components that also have a health component. There's just all, wondrous, exciting possibilities. Systems also don't directly talk to each other. The best ones are stateless. You don't want to have persistent data allocated to your systems, or also have memory leaks, which is something that really is something I never had to worry about before with the old Unity systems. But I think the performance benefits, are worth the risk. And in summary, if we're talking about dots, entities and components handle where the data is, systems handle interacting with that data. And then if you want to speed up your code for your systems, you have the job system and the burst compiler system that are really going to affect the performance of your games. You don't have to use the ECS world systems to interact with the burst compiler and the job system. For instance, I'm not that great of a coder, so I asked ChatGPT, hey ChatGPT, can you give me a local avoidance script for agents so they don't hit each other and they avoid obstacles? And it gave me a burst compiled parallel job that I ran from a mono behavior. And here we go. On the left is the script. All right, the left is a script. The only difference between the two is that the same code, but I removed the burst compile annotation on the one on the right. And there's a significant, the profiler was not even showing me the whole length of the execution time. So there's lots of stuff you can do for existing projects that don't want to switch over to ECS. If you want to use, if you could use a pump up to one of your code pieces, I would say look into the burst compiler and the job system. And yeah, the rest is just text. It's nothing really interesting. So yeah, that's everything.
What do you need to do to make a script burst compiled?
It is a mystery. So basically, you need to, you can't use classes. You have to use any native data. So Unity has made a whole new set of modules for collections, for mathematics, everything like that. So you have to use those classes. And that's pretty much the main drawback for this. Because then as soon as you start using Unity collections, which is the new module for this, you have to allocate temporary or persistent data, and that's when you get in trouble. But yeah, it's pretty much, that's the main thing.
In terms of development effort, is it a lot more work to use ECS versus the old mono behavior?
Oh man, well yeah, I mean it took so Unity, we all love Unity for its great documentation and support in its existing systems, so obviously they have great documentation on this new thing. They do not. It is really bad documentation. They actually don't have some of the basic things you would need, like they don't have an animation solution, they don't have a particle system API that can interact with ECS, but I would say that if you watch a few YouTube tutorials over a weekend, you can pretty much get a basic thing up and running. There's a few things you have to finagle, but there is an animation solution given by someone on the Unity Asset Store. But yeah, if anyone's interested in more about this, I would love to talk about it. Find me, I'll be here after as well.
Next up is Doggy.
All right, awesome. So I am Deirdre, and this is Isabelle, and we're going to give a little talk about Unreal Engine for theater production today. I'm assuming that this is this. All right, cool. So a little about us.
So I'm Isabelle. I am a senior at Lesley University, and I was the one of the environment artists at Whitesnake Projects for this project.
And my name is Deirdre Morgan. I am a current senior also at Lesley University, and I was the character and cinematic artist working on the upcoming production for Whitesnake Projects that we're going to kind of touch base on and then dive into some other applications for. So a little shameless plug for Whitesnake Projects, because this is the internship that we just wrapped up that kind of gave us the knowledge that we're going to bring to this talk today. So Whitesnake Projects is an activist opera theater company in the Boston area. This key art I actually did myself also, which was really awesome to get my work out on stage, even though I am primarily a 3D artist. So you can check out their website for more information about this show. And what they do is mostly combining opera actors on stage with digital kind of virtual production sets in the background, as well as animation, and we're using Unreal for all of that. All right, so we're first going to kind of talk about like why use game engines for not video games, right? Like we love making video games, but there's a lot of other things that game engines can do. So some of those uses are product visualization, architectural visualization. Movies are using Unreal Engine like crazy lately, so that's virtual production. Local theater companies like Whitesnake, and then also people are doing a lot of simulations inside of Unreal as well.
So we wanted to highlight some of the important tools that we used that apply to games but also apply to these other fields. So some of the biggest ones were iterating really quickly with pre-made assets and having the flexibility to use those in different ways. Source control for larger teams, so not just being able to move code around, but assets and projects in different cases. Change the world with shaders and have a lot of customization through iteration and through client work, and beautiful real-world lighting specifically in Unreal, and being able to modify that at runtime.
Yeah, awesome. So I was going to touch base a little bit about some of those specific things and how we utilize them on this project. So running in the background, really quite terrible quality because we're using this projector. So you can't really see the beautiful lighting setup that we have in this little cinematic. But we used a lot of shaders and post-process volumes. What that did when using, more client-based work was really allow us to be like, okay, you want this to look more painterly, you want it to look this way. And being able to like literally be on a Zoom call and just dial those things in to get that client the vision that they really wanted was a huge, huge tool. I wanted to talk a little bit about spawnability of objects, because I think a lot of people think of Unreal kind of as more game central and more static. And especially people that are coming from a Maya background might not realize that, yes, you can key visibility in Maya, but in Unreal, you can just spawn objects in and out to really like dial those shots in. So if you need your camera to be somewhere that your wonderful environment artist also put a tree, you can spawn that right out. And then as soon as the camera is out of that space for that frame, you can spawn it right back in. And then obviously you can't talk about Unreal without talking about real-time lighting and rendering. Kind of like I was talking about being on Zoom calls with clients, being able to, move things around right then and there and not have to be like, oh, I'm using Arnold, so give me, 10 hours while I render 3 frames. Being able to get that instant feedback was huge.
So some of the quick advantages and disadvantages to using Unreal, because there are definitely plenty of each. Some of the big advantages are quick iteration, being able to duplicate levels and quickly work with assets and move them around as needed. Flexibility in just lots of different ways. Animation layers and blending to allow for custom and pre-made animations to be imported in. Cinematic cameras that work similar to traditional cameras in the film industry. Expansive environment building tools allowing you to build environments that fit the style and look of the project you're working on, and it easily integrates with Maya and other tools as well. Some of the really big disadvantages are the learning curve. Unreal's a big software, so it definitely takes time to learn and takes time to learn how to navigate around. Source control setup has posed some problems, but it is a tool that you do have to use. And the Unreal look, it is kind of what makes people stray away from Unreal. It has a particular look, but learning to use the tools helps you to move away from this look and customize it. The project size, the projects are quite big and quite big to manage, and then it doesn't easily integrate with tools like Houdini, but it does have its own built-in VFX system.
So definitely, it's a hot topic, Unreal. So we couldn't like just promo it. We had to be like, okay, and there's some problems, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about the sequencer and kind of the nonlinear editing and animation tools that are built into Unreal, because I think a lot of people don't really realize all the really cool abilities that are here. And when I tell people that I animate in Unreal, they kind of look at me like I have 3 heads and aren't really totally sure if I know what I'm doing. I'm like, honestly, I'm not either. But there are a lot of really great things about it. One of those is that you can do it non-linear, right? So you can create your shot list and be like, okay, here's all of the things that I need to make. And then you can kind of line them up in your master sequencer so that you can jump into each one, make the changes, come back out, view the whole thing, and then be like, I want to put that at the beginning, right? And like just literally do that. Gives you a lot of flexibility. And I think that's what's really amazing about being an artist and designer in the digital space, is that you can iterate so quickly and change your mind. And it gives you that flexibility, and you don't have to like, I come from a visual fine arts background, so I don't have to like literally start my whole thing over. And then layering your animations and blending them seamlessly. So being able to create, like I worked with mocap a lot, right? So like being able to take your mocap in and then make a layer and be able to make changes that dynamically adjust your previous animation while being non-destructive is huge. And Unreal does that really beautifully and really quickly. And then it also has this ability to just blend them, right? So you can just drag and drop your animations, and it's going to try to find all of the joints and all of the root control and your transforms and try to make the best blend that it can really seamlessly. And I can't do that in Maya in the amount of time I can do it in Unreal. So those are definitely some cinematic advantages.
So on the environment side, Unreal has tons of tools. So basically, the level tools allow for really quick iteration. I cannot tell you how many times I just duplicate a level, move a bunch of stuff, and have an easy back and forth, but also allows for interactivity on a higher scale. So in this project, we had to have multiple shots lined up that would be projected on the stage. So the surface environment, I had to have shots where you could see the entire horizon line, and you could see the city and how the different levels interact. And then I also needed a shot that was on the city streets, showing the destruction of the space. So being able to line up these shots and then hand them off to a character artist or animator and allowing them to move through these spaces is really helpful, and one of the pros of game tools, because we're used to having a full interactive space in theater, allowing the different shots to be pre-made and allowing the shots to transition between each other. Color grading and lighting were also really big, and the fact that they're able to be adjusted at the same time as set dressing was huge for the fissure environment. This is actually the 3rd pass at that environment, and being able to quickly iterate and take cameras from one level to another, taking that same color grading, and be able to, as Deirdre said, get instant feedback from the head of this internship and be able to communicate with her and the art director on what they wanted. And also just for this lab environment, being able to take pre-made assets, which we didn't have enough time to make our own assets, so we had to kit bash quite a lot, which resulted in lots of merging and lots of different kind of ways to combine these assets and quickly move them around a space. I was able to go in and strip out lighting, redo lighting, and easily see how it fit the environment and iterate really quickly.
Okay, now, this is almost our last slide. I'm sure we're going over time, so just bear with us here. But fine arts focus. So both me and Isabelle come from a traditional fine arts background and then kind of transitioned into this tech space. So I think just a shout out to the Unreal barrier to entry. I know that it does a lot and it can feel like a lot. This picture that's up is actually my model and my render, and this is in Unreal, which I think really speaks to that Unreal look being really, really breakable. So I just wanted to touch on this with just a few really, really simple tools. This is just a softbox, it's a little cylinder that it's sitting on, it's an HDRI, 3-point lighting setup, and then way too many key lights additionally, right? So it's really quite a simple setup, but you can get really beautiful results. And this is obviously a shout out to Product Viz, just other ways that you can kind of start to market yourself and use your really cool game tools to kind of open up other career possibilities, because as a graduating person in the world in game dev, I'm definitely looking at that a lot. Passion for game dev 100%, and I love it. But I also am really curious about okay, I spent all this time learning Unreal Engine. what else can I do with that so that I'm still building my skill set. So I kind of wanted to shout that out, and then I'm sure you have some things to say about visual fine arts as well.
Yeah, coming from a fine arts background as well, but also kind of moving into the film world as I entered college, being able to take skills like learning how to set up 3-point lighting or learning how to set up cameras and learning how to adjust camera settings, a lot of that applies directly into an Unreal setting, and it allows you to take those practical skills in other industries and merge them into one. Well, this is common throughout the entire games industry. It's really interesting to be able to interact with filmmakers and be able to interact with people who do lighting design for stage shows. Being able to merge all these fields together is a really unique point of view to look at Unreal from.
And I think that is it. Here are our LinkedIn, and she's very cool. She's got her link tree. That is just to my LinkedIn, but you can find my portfolio and all my info there. Feel free to take a picture if you want to grab that later. And thank you so much for hosting this event so that we could come in and talk about this stuff tonight. Does anybody have any questions about all of the things we just covered? Yeah.
From an art student to other art students, what's your best resource for getting started in Unreal when you have zero clue what you're doing?
That is a great question. I think because Unreal does so much, my advice to people always is to start with a project. Because I think if you're like, hey, I want to learn Unreal and I'm going to make a game in it, it's like, why don't you make one thing? Like, are you going to make a level? Are you going to make a system? Are you going to make a movement? Are you going to make an animation? Like, just make one thing and then kind of just keep making things. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I think the biggest skill you can learn for learning Unreal is how to research Unreal topics properly and what sources you go to.
That's a great point.
Learning curve for me is learning how to properly research. So find resources you trust and come up with, like Deirdre said, a project, and then just break down what do I have to look up to get here? How do I do lighting? How do I do set dressing? How do I integrate in assets or migrate in assets? Just breaking down that process. Really
Yeah, and for that, because Unreal is so on trend, their dev post, or not their dev post, their dev forums through the Epic website is super robust. Like, there are so many devs being like, hey, I found this problem and I fixed it and I post about it. So that's kind of another advantage of Unreal that we didn't mention, is like everybody's using it, which means that everybody's having problems with it. So it's easy to find solutions to that. Yeah.
I want to commend you on your approach. I'm also started as a fine artist. Moved in and learning real-time images. Like, I feel the pain of Arnold taking 24 hours or under a frame.
Yeah.
But it is really wise to what you're doing is like learning a real-time engine. It applies to games, it applies to film, it applies to med tech, all these different ways it can branch. So that's like a really good approach, and that's kept me like employed.
Yeah,
for, like,
that's the goal.
And although my experience is not as much as Unreal. And then I just wanted to wonder, there's I don't remember the name, but there's a developer out of my hill who left Unity. He was fired from Unity. He made Cinema Machine, it was Cinema Tools, and he has a new tool set for Unreal that's like rivals what's in there and works with it. So
I think I've seen that. I think I know vaguely what you're talking about.
Check it out.
Yeah, cool.
It's like the one thing that's like pulling me back towards Unreal.
Okay. I will definitely look into it. Yeah. And if anybody wants to talk more about Unreal things from an arts background or anything related to that, come and find me and Isabelle afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you. Jay, you're up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jay, and I am an artist who somehow became a producer. Or rather, I'm still an artist. I just happen to be also a producer. So my name is Jay. I currently run a studio named Studio Blue Jay. I'm one of the 4 co-founders. Isabelle is also one of my co-founders. I'm also a marketing director and a producer and 2D artist. Outside of that, I do freelance art. Also do some volunteer work for Boston Fig as their marketing communications coordinator. And I stuck around Mass Digi for 3 years. And currently I am looking to become a games professor. I've been a lifelong artist. Started drawing when I was a kid. still draw a lot of art nowadays. 24 years of doodling. Before being a game producer, the closest experience I ever had to being a producer was being a dungeon master or a DM for Dungeons and Dragons, and I found it like really similar, like being a producer and running D&D. It's like you're running a whole project, you're helping people out, you're organizing a lot of things, sometimes a bit of math, hoping people come to meetings on time. And honestly, I never thought I'd become a producer because I'm very much an introvert. I have social anxiety. I'm neurodivergent, so I always thought people skills were not my strong suit. Or so I thought. I did get an offer to become a producer during my final run with Mass Digi during around fall 2023, but I was also like handling a full-time grad school, a part-time job, and I don't know why I did this, but I was commuting from Boston to Worcester for most of my 2 years of grad school, so that was like by train, by subway. That was a lot. And I guess the last thing I wanted to add to my plate was something that was people heavy, so I thought it'd be overwhelming. But eventually I'd have to become a producer at some point. And for my final year at Clark University for my MFA, I had to run my own game studio alongside having to write a thesis paper. And I wanted to do a runaway gay space sci-fi fantasy romance, which is a very long title, so it got renamed to Starbound Wanderers, which is about a gay couple who ran away to outer space to be together. I was really struggling to find a producer for my studio because I couldn't find anyone who was a student at Clark who was available to be a producer at a studio, or they were already a producer for someone else. I didn't get assigned a producer. And honestly, the thought of becoming a producer actually kind of terrified me at first, being a person who felt like I personally didn't have enough like people skills. So I have a friend who offered to become a producer for my studio, and she is currently a producer of her own studio at Clark University. And we also had our lead programmer at the time as a associate producer to help out. But sometimes, because we're like friends doesn't mean that we work well together in the same studio, so we had very different views on how to run the game, and because I wanted to do something on like long-term adult queer relationships, which is something that's not really usually done for games, because usually I see like romance games where it's like you have to go get the one, but it never talks about like what happens afterwards during a long-term relationship. And I wanted to explore that part about like intimacy and more mundane life, but it was nothing really explicit, but because of the nature of like the dialogue stuff that happens throughout the game, just talking about intimacy, it just kind of made it like rated M17. But my producer wanted something that was more for like everyone, and it was very different tones. And we were also like struggling over trying to pick between different project management tools. I personally am very familiar with Maire, which not only has a Kanban board, but also like for me as an artist, it was very appealing because I can put like different images on the board and move them around and put down notes to connect them to different places. While my producer at the time preferred Trello, which was more minimalistic. And a team member decided to say, like, why not use both? But I sort of regretted that statement later because people were very confused which places they were supposed to view tasks and put in finished assets, because not only did we end up using Maire and Trello, we ended up making a Google Docs task list because someone else suggested, hey, I feel like I use Google more, let's use a Google Docs. And then we had a Google Excel sheet because someone wanted to like list down when they finished their task on an Excel sheet, then trying to put down assets on Google Drive, a finished assets Discord channel, and people who only put stuff in the build and never really put them anywhere else. So too many cooks, too many ideas. And it was just kind of frustrating. Some of my team members were not sure who to listen to, where to put things. My producer also at the time, because she was being a producer after the first time, she wasn't really happy that it took up a lot of time and she didn't really get to be an artist as much. It caused a bit of a rift and we split. From like me staying in the studio, she went to a different game studio. So final semester at Clark, I got my shit together because I had to. I was the sole producer this time, and I was determined to make things much better. And I had a meeting with a mentor of mine, and I was really curious about like how he chose producers for like his internships, and it was more so like people who were willing to take the lead, but people who also like listen to people who don't talk over people and willing to help out others. It's a balance. And my team also got a whole lot larger. It went from a mere 7 people to 16 people, which was actually overwhelming at first initially because I would be bouncing back and forth between trying to help many different people. I'd be answering a question for one person while getting a DM from someone else, and then trying to answer someone else's questions. And I mean, people just want to get to know what's going on. And honestly, I want to help people. And I got some recommendations from fellow producers. It would help to have some team leads. So I assigned each row some team leads and organized my Discord server to follow suit. And this way, each team had their own mini team. My team had their mini team. And we still have like our sprints and general meetings weekly, while like each team had their own meetings, and then I'd have like lead meetings with my team leads. Mike from SapDot recommended that I use Codex for project management, which I found to be like a really nice middle ground between Trello and Jira, which is more functions than say Trello, but not as like corporate and overwhelming as like Jira. And another nice thing it was Codex was scheduled much like different cards, like a card game, so you can assign tasks to different cards. I also had a lot of fun during my final semester there. Lots of team bonding. I would bring in snacks bi-weekly, which people appreciated when they were hungry in the morning. I also try to hang out with my team from time to time, playing some party games like Jackbox. And we had fun, but also making sure like everyone did their work. And after I graduated, I really enjoyed being a producer, and I realized I actually really enjoy running an indie studio. And people were very encouraging that they wanted me to keep creating fun games with inclusive content. Since for myself, as someone who is gay, I don't really see like a lot of games where there are like gay characters as protagonists. in the game that's fun, because it's usually like a gay character as a side character where they're just gay, and what's their personality? What's their story? Do they buy groceries, pay rent, live, breathe? So I've decided for our first game, we're going to go with something totally different from what I've done for my MFA project, which I went with a cozy rhythm game, Ghost Jukebox, where you're a ghost in purgatory trying to help lost souls move on to the afterlife. And that's an indie studio that is bootstrapped in the beginning and working with primarily volunteers. Finding motivation to do work for some of my members is actually a bit rough. And if anyone remembers my comparison to Dungeons and Dragons, it's really like trying to make the time for trying to do something together, to make something incredible together. And of course, it's important to put in work in academics first and make sure you spend time with your friends and family, make money to live, because we don't want people getting kicked out of their apartments. And it's really finding a balance between your obligations. And my indie studio team, it was still a pretty large team. Sometimes we'd had 10 people, sometimes we had like 22 people at a time, which is a lot of people. Because it is a lot of people. People have so many varying schedules that I realized it's probably best to have 2 team meetings per week, but like only one of them is required. So that way it can fit in with like everyone's different schedules, while people have the option to choose between different times that they can go to for a meeting. And post-academic adult life is super busy. The pros to being a producer is, honestly, I love managing a team project, and it's really fun to see how everything from the art to the programming to the writing to audio and design just kind of mesh in together and become something really special. And being a producer, kind of like D&D, also helped me improve my people skills, communication skills, and overall just working with people better together. And the opportunity to learn about like what each role does in their studio to help them out. I'd say as for cons, probably as for myself as an introvert, sometimes my battery runs dry, especially when I'm running like a massive team of 22 people at a time. I just kind of need some time to recharge. Try to make sure we meet deadlines. Just very recently, we had to like submit a build for PAX Rising just last week. And unpredictable factors that might happen if people need to drop out for emergencies, or if we had a sudden deadline that happens without our knowledge. And also like just trying to keep up with lots of communication. I do personally find as a producer, I've spent less time as an artist than I have before. But just to say this, it wasn't necessarily giving myself up or sacrificing my time as an artist. It's more so like time management and figure out which days do I have to be a producer and which days do I have to be as an artist. And that just means I have knowledge of 2 different skill sets that I can bring together. I enjoy both, and sometimes it's a very busy life, but I love it. And thank you so much for listening to my talk. I super appreciate me. Sorry. Super appreciate you guys. I fumble sometimes with talks. But you can connect with me on social media. You can connect with my indie studio on all these links. we're looking for 1 marketer, 2 writers, 2 programmers, 1 designer, 2 animators, and 2 UI artists, if anyone is interested. Alongside that, I will be at GDC this year. I will also be at PAX East on all 5 days of GDC, all 4 days of PAX East. I also live around the greater Boston area, Boss Square, Somerville specifically, if anyone wants to reach out, get a meeting in person. And alongside that, I will be speaking at an online Zoom meeting to Clark University students from my experience from a college student to a professional.
Chris is up next. If you want to start getting set up, it'll probably take like a question while Chris is.
I totally feel for you as a fellow non-producer turned producer, introvert, everything. But I'm curious, like, were there certain aspects that you felt kind of like with like either neurodiversity or being an introvert that you're kind of worried about when you became a producer that you kind of overcome or develop strategies for? Or if not, like, did you find ways to compromise with your team on certain aspects to say like, okay, here's where my social battery ends, you know, examples like that.
Totally. I think for myself, personally, I got like super worried as someone who's like autistic about if I would say like something wrong to upset someone on my team or overthink about it. While also having social anxiety, I think something that helped me is, I guess, kind of reaffirming myself that if something wrong happens, I will reach out and either apologize or figure out like what I can do to make it right. Other things that really helped me in terms of like social battery is really having like team leads, because I felt like trying to manage like a group of like 16 people while I was at Clark, or like up to 22 people sometimes nowadays, felt super overwhelming when I have like people to also help out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi everybody, I'm Chris DeLeon, mostly known for Home Team Game Dev, but today I'm talking about that doing business isn't bad. This has been close to my heart because I know a lot of really smart, talented artists, programmers, writers, teachers, all sorts of folks just feel like it's gross and don't want to touch it and feel guilty about promoting their stuff, charging for their stuff. I want to try to fix that. One disclaimer, I've given away a ton of stuff. Free games, free content. I'm not saying there's no room in the world for free stuff. If you're practicing, if you're learning, if you're just trying to build audience or really help total beginners, it's all valid. But the things that I've done as a business are what people mostly really use and get an impact out of, and that's part I want to try to make the case for why it's important to promote your stuff and feel okay about doing it. General structure is why we feel bad about doing business, telling people about your work, charging for your work, and selling at a price worth selling. So this is both an old and a new thought. This is from Walden 170 years ago. Trade curses everything it handles. This is a Blue Sky post from a few days ago. Monetization ruins everything. Molly Crabapple's book. Artists are told to not care about commerce. It's just tangled up in us, and we feel this, and we've seen this, and have a theory of what's going on there. So there's a story from the self-help community about a baby that falls off of a couch and develops a fear of couches. Instead of a fear of falling, which means it's not actually avoiding the real problem, it's often used, for example, you've had one bad relationship, so you avoid all relationships instead of being like just, why did it not work with Becky? And so I think that in a lot of cases we've had bad experiences. We've seen business do damage. I want to say bad business is bad. Business isn't inherently bad if it's not done the bad ways. So who here hates librarians? Show of hands. Who hates librarians? Great. Okay, well, one person, we'll deal with that later. What does a librarian do? A librarian helps us find what we want to find, right? I'm green. I want to find the green book. The librarian says, oh, it's that one over there. My day is better. Ah, bless librarians. What does a salesperson do? A salesperson is actually representing a book or a game or a service or whatever else. And done correctly, they're finding who wishes they knew about it. Now, this is very proactive. Maybe they didn't even know to look for it. Is sales better than librarians? Something to think about. So why you should care is that if we do not learn to do business right, sometimes we wind up working for people who do business wrong. And again, this adds to our frustrations and adds to our guilt and our hang-ups about it. Or 2025 reason, business types may try to replace your writing, your teaching, your code with Gen AI. Trying to cut you out and sell flop to your customers, people you trained your whole life to serve. If what you do for your craft of teaching or programming is important, and you want people to have quality work, we have to learn to cut them out. Let's learn how to do business from our side. So game devs, stop apologizing for promoting your work, charging for it, and charging a price you have to. 3 main ideas that I'm going to use today are tuber repair, free burritos, and door-to-door book sales. Naturally. Tuber repair is that if you keep good work to yourself, it's actually kind of selfish. People need what you're doing. If you know how to fix tubas, and there's people in the world with broken tubas, it's kind of a moral obligation to make sure they can find you and don't have their broken tubas, feeling sad, while also you're just sitting there not using your skills, right? Now, obviously, there's lots of other ways we help people. They're bored, they want to share an experience with somebody. Maybe their business has stress we can help them with. Maybe there's a skill we could teach them. There's things that we can do with our crafts and our skills and our knowledge. It's on us to find the people who need it. For some reason, our natural reflex is like, should I start my broken tuba podcast or YouTube? And I speak from experience. I don't think that's the best idea. I think you should find existing audiences. Now, again, I've lived this. I got my little silver YouTube award. I got my podcast listeners in my niche audience. But you get what I call the loose apples in the tree problem. So if you shake a tree to find the apples, right? So I got my 80,000 Twitter followers, and I blast out, who wants this offer I have? They're kind of the ones who are ready to get that offer. It takes a long time to grow another tree. If instead you bounce around and make your case and shake other people's trees, there might be fewer loose apples in it. It might be a smaller tree, but there's a lot more trees in the forest. So your time's probably better spent on making your case, which again is part of sales. How do I get myself to be a guest on podcasts or YouTubes or et cetera, et cetera? Promoting your work will lead you to pay attention to who actually wants it. And if you can't find people who want it, we listen to what people want and we factor back into what we do next. I think listening to people isn't something to feel guilty about. The free burrito problem, if I go out there, now some of y'all know me, but if I go out around Cambridge and I hand out free burritos, a lot of people aren't going to eat that, right? They're either going to, no thanks, they're not going to touch it, or it's going to go straight in the trash the moment I'm not looking. People spend money on food, and what we eat has something to do with what food we spent money on. Now, this is also true for entertainment and education. People are spending money on those things. Some of our hang-ups, and we've all either been there or have friends who are there, financial stress we don't want to add to it, ask people to spend money that they're not going to spend. You're giving yourself too much credit, they're not going to or they can't. You're asking them to reallocate what they're going to spend on something else on your thing instead, right? Even if it means unsubscribing from Netflix for 1 month for a $15 game, you're not actually asking anybody to spend more money. Again, they can't or they won't. Free makes people wonder, what's wrong with it, right? Why is this free? We spend our time what's worth paying for, and more importantly, skipping the sales process isn't just not making our case for money, it's not making our case for why they should actually take the time to use it. Charging for our work will raise our bar to make and sell what people actually use, and again, we'll rethink if it isn't. Because you'll get real feedback that way, right? If no one's eating my burritos that are free, I can delude myself and think my burritos are fine. Because no one's actually telling me. Or even if someone does eat it, they dislike it because they just throw it away. They're not like, they got what they paid for. They don't feel entitled to come back and have a conversation with it. You didn't meet my needs. It's okay to set and meet people's needs. Discounts are valid. They're part of the ecosystem. But I do think it's a reason why a lot of us have a ton of games in our Steam library we've spent 0 minutes playing because we bought it for 85% off. And so we're only doing enough case to be worth $2 of our time. And we're like, yeah, I'll put it in my library and never play it. But is your goal to get your game in more libraries so you get people to actually play it? In which case it gets us to rethink, how do I sell at a higher value? But again, it also means that the upside of this is that everyone will eventually get your thing on 4th of July or New Year's sales or holiday, whatever. So that's okay too if they just didn't get it when it was new. But you can only run a sale if your price was high enough to begin with. You can't have a $4 product and then run a meaningful sale on it. That ain't gonna work. So our next topic then is how and why did book selling door to door ever make sense? If I give you 40% commissions on a $5 paperback novel, you go door to door knocking on it, most stores aren't opening. Most people open the door aren't going to buy it, and it ain't going to work, right? It is not going to make any sense. Waste of your day. Stop immediately. This is my father, Luciano DeLeon. He sold books to pay his way through college. Obviously, it was a different era, but it also works in a different way people think. So these are real numbers. I'm talking to him. His goal was to get 30 demonstrations into a day. Early in his career, it took him 100 knocks. Later on, a few more experience, 60 to 80. And out of those 30 demonstrations, his first year, he'd get 3 sales. He'd sell 3 books a day. What the hell? How does that even pay for college when it was cheaper in the 70s? And again, you got to split it up, right? You got a 40% commission. It also went to author's earnings, the publishing, the printing, the storage, tax overhead, etc. How the heck does that work? Eventually got 10 sales a day. You might think, again, that doesn't seem worth it. By the way, also I think that high rejection rate is part of why salespeople play so much golf. It's a high rejection thing. We're like, I don't like that my ball's in the rough. I got to let that throw off my next hits, right? A lot of doors slammed in my face or didn't open. First person to talk to, guys, sounds like it's my first sales conversation of the day. I think they're practicing that skill. So there's only 4 kinds of books he sold. Now these aren't the exact books, but it's this pattern. It's a big illustrated Bible, a topical Bible, a set of kids' books that are it's a set of 6, so arguably I guess there's more than 4, and a health textbook. When you adjust for inflation, those are $80 to $200 purchases. which to somebody, apparently 3 to 10 people a day, that was worth it. And now suddenly, 40% of the commission doesn't sound so bad because you get a $240 a day his first year doing it. 3 years of experience in, $800 a day. Again, those are adjusted for inflation already. Those are 76 numbers. 2025 numbers, but you can start to see like that's real money. And he only got paid on commission, so if they didn't sell, they didn't eat. He learned how to get better at it. Now, you might see this model like, how to make that model work for my $5 sci-fi paperback novel? Unfortunately, probably isn't going to. This is part of the challenge of doing business, and it's one of the reasons why, for better or for worse, we go around having conversations at GDC with business people, and they're like, yeah, I don't think that's a case to be made for what you're having right there. Makes us rethink what we're doing. It's part of why Encyclopedia Britannica was such a booming thing for decades. If they could sell one of these sets for $1,000 before inflation, that's a pretty good commission, right? So even 25 years ago in Office Space, this person's selling magazines door to door because long tail subscription adds up in a way that's meaningful worth selling, in a way that's not a briefcase full of paperbacks. Now you might say, Chris, the world is different in 2025, and absolutely is. Look how much we're not splitting our earnings. Like, yeah, we're still giving up to some of our platform or our payment processor, to Steam or to whatever, which, you know, if you work around that, by all means. But if you're selling digital goods, you don't have to manufacture them, transport them. You don't have to spend 13 hours a day trying to get your 30 demonstrations in. If even without that, you're selling a thing that's not a price worth doing real sales work on, it's a chance to reassess if there's something else you could be doing that's valuable to people. Also, when you're selling something that you make and do, you have more options to experiment with, right? You can try different things. You're not sort of at the mercy of, here's what my agency said I got to sell. And avoids the tension of selling the wrong thing. I grew up around a lot of teleconference salespeople in the Midwest. Apparently our accents are widely understood. But a lot of them feel guilty about what they're selling. If you're selling with your own work, you know this is the way you think it ought to be done. This is the right way to do it. And if it's not, you factor that back in from the feedback you're getting. Well, also when we charge a higher price, we can only sell to people with most 4. You gotta sell 4 times as many copies at 5 as 20, which means at some point you start making the case for people who may not actually play it, may not actually read it, may not actually need what that course is for. And the higher we can make the numbers work, again, we can find who has a higher impact in their life. With a higher price, you can put more work into finding who most wants it. And if what you're selling can't work at the price, you can work backwards from what would. So you gotta sell a thing worth selling. That's unfortunately rarely a low or zero-ish budget game, which again is where some of us are at. But it leads us to consider other models using our related skills, services, contracting, educational stuff, training games, middleware, like Cam earlier, architectural viz, other kind of product design, ways to use my skills. And there's also lots of stories from the Indiecade. I organized their alumni a bunch of years, where this is how they funded their indie thing, was doing other things, their skills they could sell to keep money coming in, that they weren't giving up control to a publisher or some outside funding source. So what I figured out at my stage at some point was I didn't know how to sell. I made a 99-cent game for iPhone in 2008. That did okay in 2008. But now I can sell an audio program, I can sell video courses, I can sell online webinars and seminars and stuff. Those I do because they're a higher price point, but it's still fundamentally, I'm still in game development skills. Different ways I can learn how to package it. Your answer may be different than the shape of mine. People don't actually want low expectations. We're often trying to manage expectations that disappoint people. They want high expectations, they want them met. And we're charging a higher price, we can deliver that better, we can be more wiggle room, we can have a slower sales process, make sure this is a match for them. It allows us to have greater impact per customer, even if it's across potentially fewer total customers. If you don't have a huge reach, it's really hard to reach the kind of volume for really, really small numbers to work. But audio programs, video courses, consulting, youth lessons, training community, I've been able to have much bigger impact in people's lives than I knew how to do from my smaller game sales. So our 3 main ideas: the broken tuba to promote your work, find people who want to know about it; the free burrito to charge for your work, make a case for the time to really use it; and door-to-door sales, figure out a way that you can do a price worth selling. If it's at a loss to let people know about it, you're not going to let people know about it. And that's a rational decision, unfortunately. So does this ever happen to you? Classic infomercial voice. If you feel bad about doing business, I want to help. Contact me at chrisdeleon.com. There's a little consulting private lessons form thingy, but if you're not in business yet, I have some capacity for just no-cost calls. I know I just said, like, oh, you should charge people for stuff. But if you're totally starting out, I especially want to, that's going to help me. I need to practice those conversations with what your hangups and questions are. I'm trying to better understand that landscape and help people navigate this. But that's my talk. Thanks, everybody.
Next up, Ben.
Any question while Ben is transferring?
Yeah, if anyone has a quick question for Chris.
Yes, Jay. Tuba, so again, I would find other people have it. So, realistically, a tuba person, right? I would find what are the instrument shops in town that people might first think to go to, and then be like, okay, well, they're probably going to go there with the tuba. They may not have a way to fix the tuba, but if they know that in town there's an answer, their customers are happier because, well, now their tuba's fixed and got some sort of connections there. Meanwhile, maybe I work out some sort of deal, so they come to me and they're like, well, I don't have a tuba, I have a trumpet. Like, well, that instrument shop, you should go check them out. They're the contact connection. They'll hook you up. But yeah, I would try to, again, just from my own experience, I don't know, I would be wary of trying to start your own tuba channel, having done that, basically. There's a lot of other people who are focusing as much on audience gathering as you are on building your feasibility.
To begin with, back in January, Chris was like, hey, who wants to give a talk about pitching at GDC? And my brain heard not the thing that he meant. So sorry about that, Chris. Let's see. Yeah, oops. Well, the pitch that I'm actually giving is how to get a talk into GDC, which I was so excited about, I just heard that. And that is based on the fact that 2 years ago I gave a talk about career advice, and coming up at GDC this year I'm giving a talk about what I learned from teaching game design about game design. I'm super excited about it. Yeah, that's that. So I'm going to tell you about how to give a talk and get it accepted. So funny story. First of all, 2 years ago, I spent the summer working on one pitch, like really hard. I was making it perfect, and the last minute, I was like, oh, I have this one other idea, and I dashed off in like 20 minutes. Start talking to a colleague. He's like, oh yeah, I spent all this time on a thing, and I dashed this other one. We both got our dashed off talks accepted, and not the ones we'd spent a lot of time on. So the moral is just dash it off? No. There we go. The moral is submit a lot of talks, and also maybe if you have if you have an idea that feels dash offable, it means that you've landed on something that is easy to understand and appealing, and maybe you should going with your gut is a little bit of a lesson there. Second, just want to lay out the groundwork, kind of know what you're doing. So there are two types of GDC talk. If you've been a bunch of times, you know this. If you haven't, or you're not as familiar, summits are like the small tent. They're like a bunch of little categories. They're easier to get talks into. The core talks are the hard ones to get into that are mostly reserved for big fancy people. You have to know when to get these things in. It's way earlier than you would think it would be. This last year, the core talks were due like August 8th, and the summit talks were due like September 26th. So that is like 9 months, like a good half year ahead of time that you have to have that on your radar to even stand a chance of getting it in. The core talks, if you look at their website, have a bunch of tracks with specific types of things they're looking for. And the summits are all different named summits. There are things like graphics and audio and things like that. As far as I can tell, you'd better pick something that matches with a track. I've had cool ideas that I wanted to pitch that I could not find a track for. And as far as I know, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. The secret that a lot of people don't know that can make this more efficient and work better is that you can submit to both, obviously at different times, and obviously if you get into one, you should retract it from the other. I can imagine a scenario where you got accepted into the summits and you wanted to hold out for the core, but they're spaced, so I think that normally does not happen. I hope a strategy is starting to emerge of have a bunch of ideas, you can submit a bunch of them, and you can submit them to all the places, a little bit like Chris's talk. Finally, the thing that I've been excited to wanted to build up for is when I went to GDC 2 years ago, I went to as many talks as I could. I hadn't been in a bunch of years, and I was excited to just soak up information and kind of learn what all the people in the industry had been up to and what I could learn from them. I used to really think that the way to get a GDC talk in was to have a great idea and credentials to sort of prove that that you knew what you were talking about. And I didn't see a single talk at GDC that fit those parameters, not one. What I saw instead were a bunch of talks that followed this, basically they all followed this one specific formula. Is it coming? There we go. Here's the thing I did, and here's why it's cool. Every single time. Every single talk, when I thought back and I was like, oh, I did a thing, and here's why it was cool. over and over again, and as I think, well, I was able to get a core talk in this time, so I think I've cracked at least sort of like the base level of the code. Obviously, if you've done a project that is successful or acclaimed, this should be easy. You say, I did this cool thing. I'll tell you how. If you had an experience or something that doesn't quite equate to that, which would sort of describe both of the talks that I gave, then I think that you stand a chance. My first talk was basically like, everybody talks about how to get into the industry. Let me, after about 20 years of doing this, talk to you about what to do after that, because some of you might want to know. And they liked that. And this time I took my last few years working as a professor at WPI, and what it was like to sort of like bring fire back from what the field of education has to say to game design and what we could learn from that. And then of course, if you do have a great idea, I don't know what your odds are, but I think that you're gonna have to plug it into that formula of how you did a thing, even if it's, I climbed a mountain and I realized these things about lighting and color and distance that you wouldn't know unless you climbed a mountain. Maybe you could pull that off. So that's it. I guess the one other thing I wanted to add was that GDC is an amazing experience. It's also extremely expensive. Getting a talk in helps, but you are actually still on the hook for travel, especially coming from our coast and staying. So getting a talk in adds a lot of stress, cuts a third of the price off, but leaves the other 2/3. It might still be worth it. And I hope this is helpful to anybody who thinks that they did something cool and might be able to tell all the game developers about it. Do we have time for me to take questions?
So one of the things you talked about is like just having a bunch of different ideas for what to talk about. How do you kind of take a look at your work and what you know and kind of break down like what you could even talk about? I feel like that's something I struggle a lot with. Like I want to give a talk, but it's like, sure, I've been working on games for like 4 years, but like, what do I actually know that's interesting?
Right. I don't know. Show of hands, who has like an inner rant that like runs constantly? Okay, so take that inner rant, and start writing it down somewhere. Because that's at least how I work. Like the, I wish I'd known this. Why did it take me so long to figure this out? I had this great conversation with this friend, and we had this idea that was super cool. And I my personal answer is a good log of inner rants is like the secret to a lot of sharing and communication, especially for our field. Was there another hand that I saw? Possibly. Yeah.
Sort of riffing off that, there was a kind of popular talk that it was like indie soapbox or something, where people would just get.
Oh yeah.
And like literally, like they kind of had to be indie famous, I think, to get on the panel, but it was like rants, and then there's another interesting thing, just like getting groups of people together, like maybe like form a panel. You might, I don't know if the odds are greater.
That was done actually last year. I was working as a CA on a panel like that where a bunch of conference associates were giving micro talks just like this, and it was really popular actually. It happened on Friday. So that does work. That is a strategy that does work.
I should have put an asterisk on there. If you're just already famous, I think none of these will apply. Also, you don't need my advice. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, this is a great time to plug our own Boston area game loop, which is a great way to just show up every summer and have conversations like this and let your inner rant sort of like fly free. Absolutely.
Can I add a note?
Yeah.
So I've done a bunch of talks at GDC and elsewhere, and one of those basically great idea too for the panel is even if you don't feel like you aren't necessarily famous or it's hard to position your thoughts on things, if you'll organize and gather a few of your friends and submit a panel thing, they love those, right? Because it covers more perspectives, it kind of helps you find your overlap. There might be some more famous friends or in different categories of stuff. They also take less preparation. You mostly kind of show up and wing it. It's not like a memorized hour presentation. So totally valid some panels.
I'll have to make doing a panel talk a goal next, so I can come back and give a lightning talk on that as well.
Boston Indies at GDC, a panel.
Right, a talk about how I give a panel about how I give a talk about giving a talk. I think we might have something going here. Yeah.
My talk submission about running indies was actually rejected. So anyway.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ben. Also, on the topic of thinking of topics to talk about, we were actually talking about this on the Slack channel like 3 days ago. I think Justin Hook had a question about it, and so there was a short thread about how you come up with that stuff. I mean, my contribution is basically like, if you work on something and you think, wow, that was really cool, I've never seen that done before, like, there you go, that's it. And lightning talks are a great way to test those ideas out, right? It doesn't need to be a full 60-minute GDC presentation. You can come try something out at lightning talks. When we do the next ones in like, I don't know, 4 months probably, something like that. It's not on the schedule yet, we'll figure it out. Thanks everyone for coming. Thank you again to all of our speakers. Let's give a round of applause to And that is going to do it for us tonight. It is now 8:30. We'll probably just wrap it up and like clean up and get out of here in about 10 minutes and head over to Flat Top Johnny's.